A group of countries are emerging as important links in a global economy that's fragmenting into rival groups. Listen to the narrative coming out of Washington and Beijing today, and you'll hear a lot of either you're with us or against us kind of talk. But not everyone is picking sides. As a group, these countries logged $4 trillion in economic output in 2022, which is more than India and almost as much as Germany or Japan. Despite their very different politics and pasts, they share an opportunistic desire to seize the economic opportunity by positioning themselves as new links between the US and China. They represent only 4% of global gross domestic product, yet they've attracted slightly over 10%, or $550 billion, of all greenfield investment since 2017. Companies shifting supply chains away from China are often moving production to countries whose economies are already highly integrated with China's, such as Vietnam. Mexico, where investment by Chinese manufacturers has increased noticeably in recent years, is also becoming an important link in the US and China trade. So it's not so much that the US and Chinese economies are decoupling, rather, they're just coupling in different places. But that doesn't mean all is well. Even if there are winners in this new era, economists warn the overall hit to global growth, with poor nations suffering more than rich ones. For consumers and central banks, one unpleasant side effect will be more expensive goods, hence more persistent inflation, as the shuffling of supply chains drives up the production costs. Yet these 5 countries prove that talk of the end of globalization is nothing but exaggerated. Goods and capital still move across borders, even more of them, in fact. Vietnam's role as a connector economy has been supercharged in the years since the US placed tariffs on Chinese goods and the pandemic sharpened inspection of the supply chains coming from China. For instance, take the $1 billion Foxconn technology factory that manufactures Apple products. MacBooks are rising in what used to be rice fields in northern Vietnam. With its combination of low labor costs, improving infrastructure, and an expanding roster of trade agreements, Vietnam has attracted a host of Apple suppliers, including Luxshare Precision Industry and Pegatron Corporation. The trend of giant electronics manufacturers relocating some production from the Chinese mainland to Vietnam goes back about a decade, but it has accelerated in recent years. The US is the destination for about a third of Vietnam's exports, while China is the biggest supplier of materials for Vietnamese producers, from machinery to material for garments. The electronics industry contributed 32% of all exports in 2022, about twice as much as a decade ago. The sector also employed 1.3 million workers as of June 2022, and Vietnamese officials are confident those figures are headed higher. When Poland's government announced last year that the country would be building its own brand of electric vehicles, called Izera, it was a clear signal that a nation that once boasted several of its own brands had bigger ambitions than just being a production hub for Western European automakers. Poland also signed an agreement with China's Geely Holding Group in 2022 to supply the technology for the project. Production is scheduled to begin at the end of 2025 at a plant located in the coal mining heartland of Silesia. The country already has well-established links to the European auto industry and giants such as Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz Group that are setting up plants to manufacture electric vehicles in the country. Apart from this, foreign investment has surged in recent years, with a large percentage of the $125 billion in greenfield investment it has attracted since 2017 coming from outside the country. Poland sits behind only China in global battery production rankings, and the shipments of made-in-Poland lithium-ion batteries totaled $8.9 billion last year, equivalent to 2.4% of all exports. The rapid increase of battery plants has been accompanied by a jump in imports of raw materials, such as graphite from China. As a result, the value of China's exports to Poland have risen 112% since 2017 to $38.2 billion last year. The dependence on Chinese inputs is widely seen as a potential vulnerability for Europe's EV industry, yet in Poland, long-term geostrategic concerns carry less weight than the immediate economic boost that the new plants can provide. This year, Mexico surpassed China to be the biggest exporter of goods to the US, but that doesn't tell the whole story of how its economic relationship with the rest of the world is changing. Since 2017, the value of Mexico's imports from China has been growing faster than that of its exports to the US. That's because many of the manufacturers who are opening plants in Mexico's border states are Chinese companies selling everything from car parts to furniture, with a focus on the US market. A survey conducted by the Mexican Association of Private Industrial Parks shows that over the next 2 years, 1 in 5 of the new businesses setting up shops in the US will be Chinese. In April, TDI Manufacturing Mexico, a branch of Zhejiang Inland Machinery, opened a 152,000 square foot facility in Hofusen Industrial Park, where all the tenants are Chinese. The California-based subsidiary of the Chinese manufacturer had been watching labor costs rise in the US and the increase in the cost of importing goods from China. So in 2021, the company decided to invest $20 million to build the plant in Mexico. The bet has already paid off, and now it has already leased a second larger plant and is thinking about a third. One of the biggest advantages for Chinese companies setting up shop in Mexico is the country's 30-year-old free trade agreement with the US and Canada. The agreement didn't count on Chinese companies, finding Mexico a side door into the country, one that allowed them to evade the tariffs levied on US imports from China. Morocco, home to the world's largest reserves of phosphate, is becoming an important player in the global car industry's transformation. The mineral is a key ingredient in lithium iron phosphate batteries, a fast-growing variety of rechargeable cells used in electric vehicles. The country already has a rapidly increasing auto sector, with plants owned by Renault and Stellantis manufacturing thousands of cars a day. As an EV battery supply chain is taking root, Morocco's strong trade relations with Europe and the US, along with its welcoming attitude toward foreign direct investment, make it a meeting place where companies aligned on either side of the growing US-China divide can compete or collaborate. In 2022, Morocco received an investment of $15.3 billion for new greenfield factory projects funded by foreign investors, almost as much as the 5 previous years combined, and the trend shows no signs of slowing. In September, CNGR Advanced Material Company, a Chinese maker of battery components, announced what may become a $2 billion project to produce enough LFP batteries to eventually equip 1 million vehicles a year. Later that month, South Korea also announced plans to make Morocco their global base in the LFP market, with mass production planned for 2026. Indonesia is actively courting companies from both the US and China to deliver on the vision of building out an entire electric vehicle supply chain. Tesla have been invited to invest, with an eye to balancing Chinese companies' dominance in refining nickel and making batteries. In March, Ford Motor signed a deal with China's Zhejiang, Geopolitical, and Brazil's Vale to lock down supplies of nickel, a metal used in the production of EV batteries. With an abundance of natural resources and a 270 million-strong population, Indonesia is betting that it is too important to be forced to choose between the world's 2 largest economies.